1800s, a group called the Bible Students appeared and gathered around a young man named Charles Taze Russell. Soon, hundreds were impelled to leave their former life and faith behind them to follow this man. Together, they started a ministry which called for them to ride bicycles, sometimes hundreds of miles, and some of them used horse-drawn wagons or buggies filled with books and magazines. It was like the first cart witnessing. They even had pictures to draw people to their carts. Together, they had started a work that had not been seen yet in modern times. Charles Taze Russell had started a movement that spread like a wildfire throughout America and soon throughout the whole world. No longer would religion be dominated by just the great churches. But what set them apart was there was very little evangelism. There were a few groups here and there, such as the Waldensians in southern Italy and France, and John Wycliffe's Lollards in England. But both were met with ferocious persecution from the church, and eventually their fire was snuffed out, so to say. It just wasn't the right time for them. But in post-Civil War America, the Bible students were able to thrive. The Bible students found America and Europe to be fields ripe for the harvest. Throughout the world, Thomas Edison had shown people how to harness energy, inventing the light bulb and the phonograph, among many other things. Shortly after that, electric motors powered printing presses that could be run day and night in lighted printeries. Russell immediately put the printing press to use, and also the telegraph, which was employed to wire his sermons to newspaper companies that were paid to publish his weekly sermons. The horse and buggy soon disappeared with the invention of the automobile in the dawn of the 20th century, along with motion pictures and radio, all of which were used to spread the Watchtower's message. Now, millions of Jehovah's Witnesses carry smartphones and tablets and have at their fingertips the Bible and other Watchtower publications in hundreds of languages. Ask any Jehovah's Witness and they'll say the good news is being preached throughout the land. But is it really good news? In the Bible, it says God will allow for an undetected, deluding influence over an entire people of kingdom preachers. Paul foretold that God would allow a man of lawlessness to exist as an operation of Satan, to allow a lie to stand until the manifestation of Jesus Christ. This is what the apostle wrote. But the lawless one's presence is by the operation of Satan, with every powerful work and lying signs and wonders and every unrighteous deception, for those who are perishing as a retribution, because they did not accept the love of the truth in order that they might be saved. That is why God lets a deluding influence mislead them, so that they may come to believe the lie, in order that they all may be judged, because they did not believe the truth, but took pleasure in unrighteousness. And we do not have to wonder what this lie is, because the Bible spells it out for us. The lie that they've come to believe has to do with Jesus and his second coming. This is what Paul wrote. However, brothers, concerning the presence of our Lord Jesus Christ and our being gathered together to him, we ask you not to be quickly shaken from your reason, nor to be alarmed either by an inspired statement or by a spoken message, or by a letter appearing to be from us. To the effect that the day of Jehovah is here, let no one lead you astray in any way, because it will not come unless the apostasy comes first, and the man of lawlessness gets revealed, the son of destruction. It's a fact, even though these kingdom preachers believe they are preaching the good news of the Bible, the Watchtower is also the source of the seemingly inspired statements and spoken messages, along with a steady stream of written material that's said to be food at the proper time from the faithful and discreet slave, heralding the parousia of Jesus Christ as an accomplished reality. Now, the Watchtower says that the clergy of Christendom make up the composite man of lawlessness, but the great churches have not yet sponsored any sort of worldwide campaign announcing Jesus' second coming and that the day of Jehovah is here. The real truth is, many years ago, an American farmer named William Miller is the origin of the 7 times of Nebuchadnezzar's madness, and that it could be used to figure and calculate Jesus' second return. He predicted it would be in October of 1844, and when Jesus never came, it became known as the Great Disappointment. But this was just the beginning of many joining in on the end-time speculations. Well, William Miller had a great influence on the young Charles Taze Russell's mind, and Russell most likely truly believed that the 7 times was some sort of key that unlocked some secret chronology. But as we all know, the Watchtower is not honest when it comes to their history. As all Jehovah's Witnesses know, the 1914 doctrine is based on the 7 times chronology that is tied to the destruction of Jerusalem that brought an end to the dynasty of kings that began with David, the 2nd king of Israel. Now, anyone with common sense can see and know that the Gentile times didn't begin in 607, but to this day, a century after Russell came out and said, "The Gentile times have ended," the Watchtower is still teaching the same lie. When Jesus told his apostles the temple was going to be thrown down, and a stone would not lay upon a stone, they knew that Jesus was not talking about some temple back in Nebuchadnezzar's day. A few days later, when the apostles approached Jesus and asked him when this destruction would come about, Jesus told them that the temple would be surrounded by armies and that the holy place was going to be desolated. Luke's account goes on to say, "And they will fall by the edge of the sword and be led captive into all the nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled on by the nations until the appointed times of the nations are fulfilled." It is crazy to think that the apostles thought Jesus was speaking about something in the past dealing with Babylon's conquest. Jesus was preparing them for what lay ahead. Besides, Jesus clearly said Jerusalem will be trampled on by the nations. He did not say it has been trampled upon or it will continue to be trampled upon, as if the trampling had already begun and was ongoing. Had the 1st century disciples believed Jesus was speaking of something from the past and not something to come, it's doubtful they would have fled Judea when they realized the disgusting thing stood where it ought not, in the temple. Incredibly, though, the Watchtower makes Jehovah's Witnesses believe something that would have seemed nonsense to the 1st century apostles. Such is the deluding influence that's wielded by Satan over the organization. But as we know, Jesus took the opportunity to outline the events and the end of the Jewish system. He also related that would precede the fall of Jerusalem, the sign of his presence and the conclusion of the system. Thus, the appointed time for the nations to trample Jerusalem have to do with developments that will affect Christ's congregation. That is evident by the 11th chapter of Revelation after the holy city had been raised up by the Romans, but which speaks of the temple courtyard and the holy city being trampled upon by the nations for 42 months. It's also expressed as 1,260 days, thus the appointed times of the nations. Back during the Great War, a test arose after Russell had passed away on Halloween night, and a power struggle ensued at Bethel, where Rutherford and several others were taken off to the Atlanta Penitentiary. Paul foretold that in order to implement his operation, Satan would employ every powerful work, lying sign, and wonders, and every unrighteous deception. Obviously, the demons knew that 1914 was a fixed year. They may have fixed it themselves. As shown, the 7 times have nothing whatsoever to do with the appointed times of the nations. It is a lie. But in order to keep the delusion on course, the devil orchestrated the Great War to break out on schedule, and he obviously maneuvered things to bring about the persecution that landed Rutherford in prison for a few months. But over the course of the decades since then, up to the present day, those things have served as powerful and deceptive lying signs, since they are perceived as fulfilling various prophecies when such is not the case at all. But the result is Jehovah's Witnesses are convinced that Jesus' second coming has begun and the day of Jehovah is here. Meanwhile, nations are speaking of wars, and we are still being plagued by a global pandemic. It would seem the horses of the apocalypse are praying at the gates.